Welcome back to Your Day. Thank you for watching us today. There are two major American institutions that are in decline in America: getting married and having children. Now, experts say these trends could affect the future of the family and the economy. Here to tell us what's happening is Mark Luetke from Thread Marketing Group. Good morning, Mark. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Amanda. You got the boys with you today,
I do, yes. Boys Club today, but that's all right. We're still having a good time. This is definitely a trend that I've noticed. I'm an older millennial, and while I'm married, I feel like a lot of people around me are not. Is this a new trend?
It's a trend that's emerging, I would say. Last month, data from Pew Research reported that almost 40% of adults aged 25 to 54 do not have a partner today. And that means that they're not married or not living with someone. And that's up from just a third 30 years ago. So the number of adults without a partner has been increasing steadily since then.
Okay, so what do we think is behind this trend, this decline?
Well, part of it is cultural, right? There has been a rise in the share of people living together, but that's not enough to explain the drop in marriage. Instead, experts say couples are under less pressure from family and friends to tie the knot. Young people prefer to focus on career or savings, not marriage, as their first step toward adulthood. And interestingly, the decline in church-going has reduced the stigma of people living together or being alone. In addition to that's the cost. Marriage has become a luxury item. Middle-class Americans are forsaking marriage in bigger numbers than the rest of the population, largely because of financial and job insecurity. But meantime, 60% of affluent couples are now married, pooling their incomes and buying homes and luxury goods as they begin to raise families.
And I totally believe that. It's expensive, and so are children and having children. Is that also why we're seeing a decline in, couples growing a family?
Yes, that's one of the reasons. The numbers are stark. The number of babies born in the United States is at the lowest point in 40 years. In fact, we know that the number of babies born globally declined even more sharply in the last 2 years because couples were intentionally putting off pregnancy and having sex less often, data shows, for three reasons: the COVID pandemic, of course, lockdown restrictions, and the global recession that broke out. But actually, fewer kids in the United States reflects a longer-term trend that goes back 90 years when the government first tracking it. And as you pointed out, there are several reasons for this. One of them is raising children costs a lot of money. I think a factor is couples having children later in life, which leads to smaller families. Mm-hmm. There's just a desire for fewer children. 74% of couples who are already parents say that they're unlikely to have any more kids.
Yeah, I know in my situation, we're part of this generation where generally both members of the household need to work. It didn't used to be that way a number of years ago, and a woman could stay home with her kids and raise her family. Now I'm in a situation where I had to work the second that I could and have continued to do so. And I know a lot of women and, even men around me as well are kind of in the same situation where it's like you have to get your career started, you're focused on that, then you get married and have kids much later, and then by then you're like, okay, now I'm almost 40. I don't want to have any more.
Having kids is an expensive proposition. Mm-hmm. Child costs a lot,
yep.
A variety of things. So there are a number of factors, both economic but also cultural, that are keeping those birth numbers down.
So there's an impact on the entire economy here. Tell us about that.
Right. For years, economists have linked fewer two-parent married families with the fact that they have lower median incomes, there's less participation in the workforce, and there's growing income equality. But so it's an economic factor to not have married couples and couples with children. But there's a concept called the power of the family, in which experts find that the larger the number of married parents in a state, the more robust the economy is. So most striking is that the decline in the birth rate over time is creating a rising share of people over the age of 65. And this affects what the economists call the replacement rate. That means that there are not enough new babies being born to replace the larger number of older people who will pass away. So this means there's a shrinking workforce, less demand for housing, and higher government spending with fewer young people around to pay taxes. Check the number out. In the 1960s, there were 6 working-age people for every retiree, and by 2035, it'll just be 2 to 1.
Oh,
and
wow.
that has a profound impact on tax revenues,
Right.
government spending, and benefits.
Right. Yeah, I definitely won't be receiving Social Security by the time I retire. It seems like they're going to have to figure something out with that. So, really.
We'll be working very hard to help pay for your Social Security.
Yes, absolutely. Mark, interesting trends. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Always good to see you. Thanks.
Yeah, you too. Take care.